Mercury, and I'm back with another Here Be Dragons. If you're new here, I made 100 dragons in total, and now I'm redrawing and making creature sheets for all of them. Today we're going to be covering dragons 4 and 5, the Reef Stalker and the Woolen Drake. Now the Reef Stalker is my favorite, so I'm excited to talk about them. It was the Flying Manta Ray and the Reef Stalker that got me into making creature sheets, so I'm really excited to talk about the Reef Stalker since we covered the Flying Manta Ray last week. Just before we begin, I'm changing some things on how I do this. First off, I used to have one of my characters come on as guests, but I'm not going to do that anymore because they would only be in the front and it was just too much work to have a static image with no voice acting on screen. So instead, I'm going to share some more lore in both sections. If you guys like them, maybe I'll do it again. But I won't for this video, but for now, it's time to talk dragon. Tropical waters always seem so inviting, from the bright blue water to the colorful fish and reefs they hold beneath them. While it's always good to be careful because of sharks, but they rarely attack others. You're more likely to be killed by a cow than a shark. So everything should just be fine, diving on the water, looking at the schools of colorful fish dash away as feet touch the wet rock below. Sharks aren't the only hunters in the reef, but once you see them, it's too late. The Reef Stalker, a two-front-legged dragon known as a lindworm that used to be known as the Reef Killer and Death Stalker. With names like these, it's no wonder why they have such a bad reputation. But just like sharks, reef stalkers are mostly misunderstood. They only attack when you get too close, and the majority of people who get killed by them are standing on the dragon before they get attacked. They are commonly known to fight with their teeth and claws, but their long and powerful tails have been known to break bones. Reef stalkers are in no means peaceful creatures, but they certainly are patient, often waiting for their meals and usually blending in with rocks before they strike at their victims. Sadly, for their victims, they do this very well. The majority of the deaths are caused by female dragons, them being the actual stalkers of the reef. They are notably larger than the males, and they're the only ones seen hunting via camouflage, because the males move around a lot more to find mates. Because the men move a lot more, they camouflage less for one major reason. Coral can't settle on their body. Many reef hunters are patient, but what separates this lindworm from the rest is the fact that the females are so still and so unmoving that coral finds homes on their backs. With real coral on them, the task of camouflaging becomes infinitely easier, as they are just more than living animals in the ecosystem at that point. It's why the mass hunting of reef stalkers was all the more treacherous to the reefs they called home. More and more people began to die, being clawed and typically eaten by these vicious dragons that could care less if you had a family waiting for you at home. Before the Reef Stalker was discovered, there was believed to be a serial killer killing people in the reef. It was believed by many locals, but when bodies, more specifically the little left of them, was discovered, the idea of it being an animal became all the more likely. And it wasn't discovered that it was an animal till a man by the name of Vauden survived a reef stalker's attack when the mystery was finally answered. But before that time, there weren't many reef stalker deaths due to the people avoiding the area because of the tales of a murderer. But there were enough, typically of travelers who knew better, to cause panic on the east coast of Fantasticus. So when Vauden was struck by the Reef Stalker and miraculously survived, so came the mass hunt. These were dangerous dragons after all, and if they were going to kill people, then people would have to kill them first, and they began purposely hunting them down. This increased the Reef Stalker-related deaths significantly, which gave people all the more reason to hunt them down, which they eventually got better at doing. Hundreds of dragons were killed every day, most often taken home as a trophy because of their beautiful bodies. But the coral that called them home would soon die because of being out of the water, making the richest usually throw them out and to kill a new one to replace them. Long after the fight was over. Marine biologists figured that at one point there were less than 50 living out in the wild, And with the reef stalkers getting hunted, many of the reefs that they were native to were now harmed, both because of the coral that found home on the lindworm, and during the actual hunt, many of the reefs got damaged as the lindworm tried their best to escape. The population control that the reef stalker was doing made this even worse. Creatures began to tear apart the reef that normally the reef stalker would have taken care of. That's when famous zoologist and dragon Vettelkirsi came into the picture. Being a dragon that grows over 10 feet tall, people were threatened and very likely to listen to her as she called out the damages being done to the reefs and the low population of a reef stalker, making them now critically endangered. This allowed the reef stalkers to be one of the first dragon species classified as protected in more than one town or city. While it mainly was to get an alliance with Vettelkirsi, it did save the reef stalkers from extinction, which is in the end what Vettelkirsi's goal was. This is actually where she gets most of her prestige and fame, not because of the bestiaries that she wrote. The reef stalkers are still endangered to this day, but their population has dramatically recovered due to Vettelkirsi's efforts. So, let's add the reef stalker to our taxonomy chart. Link in description, of course. Fun fact, the reef stalker was the first creature I actually made a scientific name for. It was also the dragon that made me get interested in taxonomy as a whole. So, overall, the reef stalker is really special to me. I probably have more lore around it than many other creatures, including the ones made before it, like the mantle wyvern and the sea foam lung, which are also pretty important. But we still have one more dragons left, so let's not delay. It would be nice to say that winter is cold and dead, but could you really say that when all the seasons are that way? A frozen desert isn't for the faint of heart, and it certainly wasn't made for humans. Crops can't grow there, even goats and sheep can barely survive during the fall. But the human will to conquer such harsh land remains undisputed, no matter the costs. Up in the mountains lives a dragon, a drake, specifically called the Woolen Drake. These four-legged beasts are built to survive the harsh and the cold, and they've got very powerful legs, great at scaling mountains, and a protein-filled diet to top that. They are also covered by a thick and naturally growing wool. Now, these are not the only dragons in the region to have such wool. For example, cloudwalkers are also a source of wool that isn't harvested from sheep or alpaca, but due to their rarity and the fact they can fly away, the woolen drake is much more suitable of a source when it comes to dragon wool than the cloudwalker. The reason why a woolen drake is used to substitute the wool from a sheep or alpaca is due to the fact that they do not need crops to live, as they are carnivores and not vegetarians, unlike, well, sheep. And the drake is very thick and tough, way more built to survive a harsh, frozen climate than any sheep could ever, making them more likely to live past a few weeks, and that's very good for the sake of ranchers. As a bonus and a negative, drake wool is very thick and tough. It does make it harder to process and to become fabric, and harder to sew and make clothing with it. However, woolen coats or garments made from drake wool are much stronger than wool sourced from other places besides, well, the cloudwalker, but that's unreasonable at this time. Those who put in the work to make these usually winter coats with the drake wool are very rewarded for it, as this coat will be able to live and survive through many more years than a sheep woolen coat could. Woolen drakes have never had a high population, but due to them being a pretty common source of wool, they were mostly bred and domesticated out, so their species number has gotten a lot larger in the years. There are still very few wild woolen drakes, but their overall population is doing great, unlike the dragons we have heard from before. Domesticated woolen drakes are heavily found in fenced ranches. The fencing is really important when dealing with these dragons. They are carnivores, and some draconologists say they can never be fully tamed. Woolen drakes are notably friendlier than other drakes, especially ones found in the Parvus family. While they aren't going to pick a fight for no reason, and they barely do it when people or other animals encroach on their territory, being native to a region right besides the harshest one, and it believed that most domesticated of these drakes are never going to be fully domesticated, it's simple to say they do what needs to be done. And that means one unfortunate rancher who didn't have strong enough wood, nor were his posts close enough together, might happen to have to get eaten. Woolen drakes have very powerful horns, so if you dare build a fence out of wood, you better make sure it's the best wood you could possibly get, and you have more than enough meat to feed them through the winter months. When these drakes were found out of their pen by winter travelers who wished to remain anonymous, they knew something was wrong, and when they found the rancher's brutalized body in the snow, they knew what went wrong. The incident was later reported that these drakes were taken to a new home a few months later. Now, as you could tell, I had a lot less lore and just general information about this creature, especially because the script was written before I finished the creature sheets. Due to my timing and schedule, and I had to record this a lot earlier than I normally would have for other videos. However, we still gotta add them to that taxonomy chart. Yeah, let's go. So, here they are, the Woolen Drake. Again, found into the description, but let's move on. And you may be wondering why I'm telling you stories of humans and dragons being so opposed to one another. What is the moral here? What am I trying to say? Well, if I had a moral to this, then what it would have to be is to be cautious in unfamiliar areas, but more notably, to be cautious around animals of any kind, including humans. Cows killing more humans than sharks is a very real thing, which is why I say that you should be careful around any animal, whether wild or mysterious like the Reef Stalker, or very familiar and commonplace like the Woolen Drake. Both of these are cautionary tales mildly about real life, but don't be afraid of nature or animals. Why they might not be safe to cuddle, they still help the ecosystems flourish, and they deserve respect for what they do. It's more specifically why in the tale of the Reef Stalker, since it is way more fully developed, the note of the actual harm being caused to reefs due to the mass hunting of these creatures, which is actually seen in a variety of a lot of hunting and fishing done around reefs, which I've got stuff in the description talking about that more if you would like. It's why I bring this up. It's very important to me that animals stay safe. And it's also why, and since humans are animals, I also want you to stay safe. For anyone who's watched it to this end of the video, thank you so much. I appreciate you so greatly, and I hope you have a good night or day wherever you may live. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!